Hello everybody, my name is Linda and we are here for our second part of lakeshore birding. So I'm going to give you some identification tips of the birds that we would possibly see here during the winter time. Of course, lakeshore birding is great throughout the whole year, especially spring and fall migration. And we're going to talk about some of the birds that you can expect to see here during the winter time. I'm going to start out with a couple of my favorites. This is a loon. And you can see how low he is to the water, okay? And this neck in this characteristic position. And then you look at the beak. It's a spear-like beak. And that's because he feeds upon fish. These guys can dive over 100 feet deep. And they're able to do that because their feet are very far back on their body that acts like a propulsion. Very common to see loons here, spring and fall migration. A lot of times they're single birds, kind of maybe out in deeper water by themselves. So you gotta always scan with your binoculars about those single birds and look in between the waves. Another bird that you could expect to see along the lake shore is the belted kingfisher. This one is the male, and the female actually is more colorful than the male. It has a reddish stripe. A lot of times you'll hear these guys rattling before you even see them. They're called as a loud rattle. And look, they have the same spear-like beak as the loon. Instead, they have little tiny feet that they use to perch above a stream or the edge of the lake, and then they will actually dive down to catch the little fish. Now, we don't see these guys too much around here in the wintertime, but as long as there's open water in the creeks and along the lake, you can see them. And then the last bird with the spear-like beak is the great blue heron. Again, you see his spear-like beak. These are very large. When they fly, they hold their neck kind of in an S shape, and when they flap their wings are kind of curved. Versus an eagle that will kind of soar. And then their legs are kind of trailing behind them, so it's kind of a comical flight. Now these guys, just like the kingfisher, will stay around here during the winter time as long as there's open and moving water. So a lot of times you'll find them more along the rivers or in some of these hot water areas that Jana and I talked about earlier. This has been a harsh winter, and one thing that's common is that these birds can get frostbite on their feet. It's very common that they will be brought into wildlife, nature centers, and with frozen feet. If you ever find one of these birds or any bird injured, make sure you call the wildlife experts. You never want to go near this bird because he can do some damage with his big beak, and he will use it like a spring there, and you can't believe how fast they can move, and they can injure your face, especially they aim for. Another bird that you will see, especially in spring and fall migration, is the osprey. Another common bird that we can find around the lake shore. Probably not in the winter time, you won't find it, but as the weather warms up and you get that south wind, you're going to see them. These guys are pretty much fish eaters, and their nesting numbers are coming back. We have some nests in Lorain County. How do you know if it's an osprey instead of another raptor? One thing is you can see the crooks in his wing when he flies. His wings are about 6 feet. If you compare that to the red-tailed, the long, broad wings, and then you look at his wings are edged, a margin in black, where this guy has more of patterns of black and white. Also, if the sun is right, you can see the reddish coloration on its tail. Don't have an eagle mount to carry around with me, but if you do happen to see an eagle, which is very common even right now, they have long, broad wings, hold their wings flat, and you can see the big white head. Sometimes they get confused with turkey vultures. Turkey vultures are dark all over, but very small head. You almost don't see the head. They both kind of have fingertips with their feathers, but the turkey vulture holds his wings in a V shape, V for vulture. So a lot of times you'll see eagles down by the lake shore. They will actually feed on ducks and gulls and other birds that may have perished in the cold weather. All right, so we're going to go come down here and talk about a couple of the other little birds that we got. This is a coot here, and at this time of year, especially around the hot waters, you will see them kind of around the edges by the rocks, looking for food there. They'll also be out in the deeper water, but they tend to like kind of the sheltered areas. And I don't have a mount of it, but another bird that you would see kind of going around the rocks is the hooded Merganzer, the male, and then the male and female here. He's got a crest. Very beautiful birds. They might get mixed, you might get mixed up with them in the bufflehead, but the bufflehead is all black and white. They are about the same size, but these guys are pretty cool. They are divers and they just bob up and pretty neat. You don't see them in as huge of a rafts or groups as some of the other ducks. And then one of the unusual ones, more of a big ocean bird, the WhiteWinged Scoter. So this was also down at hot waters. So you could see the characteristic white patches on its wings. And then here's a photo of it flying. So these are deep diving ducks. Really cool to be able to see that here. Another deep diving duck that you don't get to see too many of them here is the long-tailed duck, or used to be known as the ode squab. So they do feed a lot on fish, but also mollusks. And again, you can see the placement of its feet near the back end of its body to help him dive down in underneath the water. One of the other birds that we are beginning to see a lot of here is the Doublecrested Cormorant. You can see a long neck. Unlike the heron, though, it has very short legs, so it does perch. It is a diving kind of duck. It has a hooked beak. And in some areas, these guys are kind of overrunning it, and their numbers are getting kind of concentrated in some areas. So that is a bird of concern, and what its populations could do to some of the more other common birds that live here. Going back to some of the diving ducks, the Canvasback. This one here is a male, whereas the female are more drab, brownish color. You can kind of see the long, sloping forehead and beak. Very easy bird to identify with the reddish head and that silhouette of the beak there. Another one similar is the redhead duck, but that has more of a rounded head and does not have the sloping bill. These guys you will see in numbers of thousands in the open waters. And then another little guy here, this is the Ruddy Duck. Look how small he is. Ruddy, the tail feathers are very stiff. This is the male winter plumage, and you can see the characteristic white patch on its cheeks. And a little bit smaller than the bufflehead. These guys tend to pass through a little bit later in the spring than the buffleheads. And then we have the Goldeneye. Some people might get it mixed up with the bufflehead, but look at the difference in the placement of the white. This is kind of on the back of his head where the white is just between its beak and its eye. Common Goldeneye. And then another diving duck about the same size as the Scaup. This one is a female, kind of the brownish color, characteristic little white patch between the beak and the eye. And again, these guys are in great numbers on the lake, and pretty cool birds. We also did a more in-depth duck identification in class or session number 3. So you can go back and look at those for the diving versus dabbling ducks, and that identification will help you. So you should always have your bird ID books. That's very helpful. And going back to the gulls, you can see some of these. The herring gull, Jana was mentioning, it takes 4 years for the adult plumage. So these will definitely help you in your identification. And by looking at the wingtips and the patterns of the wingtips on a lot of these gulls will also aid in your identification of them. You know, the striping and the barring and the size of the colors on the wings. So the Sibley's is a good book, and then pamphlets. And here's the Sibley guide. So you should always have your identification book with you, because you never know what you might come across at Lake Erie with the unusual gulls, the way the wind is blowing, and the ice, how that has moved around. So birding the Lake Erie shore is definitely exciting all year round, and please make sure that you look online. I know that there are some birding trips that are posted, so hopefully you will get and sign up for those. Thank you very much.
All right, and we're just going to pan over to take a look at the shoreline. See what we can see out here today. You can see that it's a little cloudy, so today would be a good day for birding out here. However, most of the shoreline is currently locked up with ice. We have seen a few gulls hanging out. And then if you look out here, there is our Lorain lighthouse. Well, thank you everyone for joining us today, and we hope to see you out birding.